Greetings, people of the internet, and welcome to yet another edition of Politics with Programs. Today, wanted to talk about a couple quick things. I think what I'm trying to do is get a lot better at putting this thing out quickly, but with good quality. I kind of teeter back and forth between doing it on Zoom and doing it with a high quality camera that actually looks clear in HD and having good sound. And I'm a sound person, so I want it to sound good too, and I want it to look good. But it's also easier for me to do it on Zoom because it's quicker, but I have the free Zoom, so maybe I need to upgrade. And this is all just nuance that you probably don't give a crap about, but you know, that's how it is. So anyway, today the first thing I wanted to talk about is this Joe Rogan clip where they're talking about Leo DiCaprio, because, you know, it's interesting to me, the culprits who are always upset with how other people conduct their sex lives. And it's usually the people who are secretly doing something they shouldn't be that are the most upset at someone like Leo DiCaprio, who's having sex with 19-year-olds or 20-year-olds or whatever at 45. He's my age probably. And of course, you know, my view is a little bit biased. I'm like, yeah, get him, Leo, you know. But by the same token, it's like, what business, if it's two consenting adults, what business is it of yours? None, really. And back in the day, I mean, I come from the era where Democrats and liberals made this argument. They weren't the pious sexual criticizers of everyone, because we had Bill Clinton, who, you know, Lewinsky was a pretty girl, you know, and she was younger, and you know, he might have been, there's people that say he was abusing his power or whatever. But anyway, let's watch this clip really quick just to give you an idea of what they're talking about.
Vacation, like we went to Italy, and you see some of these yachts that are like outside of these islands, and you know, it's crazy. It's crazy to imagine that these people feel poor compared to someone who pulls in with a bigger one.
Yeah. And insecure, like, oh, I'm not making enough. It's crazy.
Right.
I mean,
you got a gold digger with you, and she might jump ship in the middle of the night and swim over to the other boat.
Real talk.
You wake up, you're like, Ursula?
Where'd she go? Is she on a bikini on that big yacht? Motherfucker.
And it's Leo. You're like, damn it.
God damn it.
Leo struck again.
Well, if she's over 30, you don't even have to worry about Leo.
Not over like 23. Yeah, 30. 30
That's
is like over the hill.
Remember the photos of Jeff Bezos and his girlfriend,
when
Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yeah,
she was like smiling at him, and then Jeff Bezos like was joking around about pushing him off a cliff. Like,
yeah.
They're like, you don't have to worry about her, bro. She's 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could see you could see her doing like the cost benefit analysis, like Leo or richest man in the world.
Well, also, like, can you even keep Leo? That's not going to work.
No, you need to be like 19.
Well, even if you're 19, as soon as you hit 24, he's going to be shopping.
Have you seen like all the stuff this is where the internet is so glorious. They make these like charts and graphs of every single one of his ex-girlfriends and when they broke up at what age, and it's always like 23. He's like, oh, sorry, we need to...
They probably want to do something with their life, or they want to get married, or they want to settle down, or they just want to find meaning.
We were joking on Dumpster Fire.
I love that. Joe Rogan, misogynist Joe Rogan's the one who's making the argument that, hey, like, these women probably get tired of Leo because they want to go start their own lives and have meaning. I thought it was interesting. I pulled up, there was this whole thing with when Clinton was impeached, you know, just to go back to the politics of all this, is, you know, the liberals were the ones who were defending kind of sexual freedom. And, you know, even though what Clinton did was bad, cheating on his wife, it's his own personal business and his wife's business, not really your business, and it has nothing to do with how the country's run. And I still believe that today. I think that's the value that we should have stuck with. But now when it's politically convenient, and this speaks a lot to who the Democrats are in 2023, they're the Republicans of this era. You know, they've all moved over there because they were outraged by Trump, who frankly, you know, should have been afforded the same level of consistency that Clinton was afforded. But again, even Obama, someone like Obama had to be at a higher standard. He couldn't even, as the first black president, he couldn't even slightly mess around. The tiniest mistake and they would have just, you know, they beat the crap out of him for having a tan suit, you know. So I could only imagine what they would do if they caught him messing around on his wife. But anyway, there was a whole list of people who were, outraged by Clinton during the impeachment trials that were later went on to be commit adultery. Number one being, of course, Newt Gingrich, who was cheating on his cancer-stricken wife and ended up marrying this younger, hotter woman. And then there was the guy Larry Craig, who was an Idaho senator who got busted in the bathroom for he was trying to solicit gay sex in an airport bathroom. And then apparently, according to this, John Edwards, I mean, obviously he got busted. His wife was sick though. I mean, John Edwards, same with Clinton. It was kind of like one of those things where, okay, whatever. Robert Livingston is one. He had what? Oh, Livingston had to step down as speaker because he too had an affair. I didn't even know about that. That's funny. Former House Judiciary Committee Chairman Henry Hyde. So there's a whole list of them. John Ensign was another one who's from Nevada. And yeah, anyway, the piety stuff needs to stop. And good on Rogan for kind of, just explaining why the outrage over Leo is a joke. So, on to more serious topics. As you all know, we have a war in Ukraine that we're supposed to be excited about and supportive of, although we're not actually fighting in it. And the history of this war pre-2022 is virtually unknown to most people. Most people love Zelensky, but couldn't tell you who the president of Ukraine was before him, let alone before him. So I won't get into it here, but you get the idea. So I came into politics during the Iraq War era where everyone was anti-Bush. And I've already gone over this, how Al Jorgensen from Ministry did a trilogy of albums against Bush and now is promoting the Ukraine war on his tours, which is a little bit of a joke. But as things have evolved, we saw this anti-war protest, the Rage Against the War Machine protest a couple weeks ago in DC. And there's been a couple other little protests starting to pop up around everything, because it's very disgusting when you look at the big picture how unquestionably just billions and billions of dollars keep getting funneled to Ukraine. But then we have something like this rail disaster in East Palestine, and I don't know. I mean, can we really afford that? And now this weekend you have the collapse of the SVB, the Silicon Valley Bank. And as we'll talk about a little bit later in this other clip, we need to bail them out because why? There's East Palestine, Ohio needs all of our attention and all of our resources at the moment until that's fixed. But also Flint, Michigan, and I think it's Mississippi or Houston. There are problems all over with our infrastructure in this country, and we're allowing these criminals to just dump billions and billions of dollars into a war in another country. And no one voted on this. It's past the point where we have any control, and it's very obvious why they're doing it when you see what happened with the Nord Stream pipeline, and how Ukrainians even are being used as basically pawns in this game. I feel bad for the country of Ukraine because they're being used by, U.S. imperialist forces at the moment. And you can say whatever you want about it. I support those people, and I don't think that what Putin did was okay. It wasn't right. But there's a lot more involved in the situation than what the public really thinks about, which is from 2022 forward. So what I wanted to cover here is the Grayzone recently pointed out some protests are starting to break out in Europe. So let's watch this clip of Max and Aaron talking about that.
Strategic calculus is beginning to change a little bit for the war planners as they're seeing grassroots mobilization against the war. We don't feel that our interests are represented by the foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, who like an elephant in a china shop.
Elefant im Porzellanladen über das internationale Parkett trampelt
and is so out of control of her public statements that she accidentally declares war on Russia. We do not feel that our interests are represented by the defense industry lobbyist Strzok Zimmerman, who cares about the financial situation of Rheinmetall and company more than about the fate of the people of Ukraine or the world. Same with Raytheon and Lockheed Martin in the US. We also don't feel that our interests are represented by the Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who at first hesitated and called for prudence and caution, and then gave up, having heard enough of the militarists from the ruling coalition, and now crosses one line after another. No, Mr. Scholz, you don't represent our interests. We do not want German tanks to fire on the great-grandchildren of Russian women and men. This is complete historical amnesia. Have you forgotten German history? And so, clearly a reference to World War II, where now we could potentially see, with the arrival of German Leopard tanks, the first armored confrontation between German and Russian tanks since World War II. And there were battles between German panzer divisions and the Red Army in Kherson, which is where these tanks are being sent to. So,
and Scholz is such a chump that he gets roped into promising all these Leopard tanks to Ukraine on the condition that other NATO allies provide them too. And since then, what's happened? None of them have stepped up. None of them, except.
So this is pretty nuts. I think another thing I wanted to touch on in this piece that Max and Aaron did was they talk about Democracy Now's covering of the war protests, and it's pretty funny how terrible Democracy Now has gotten, right? More like democracy. Wow. Democracy? Wow. So they should change that. Democracy? Wow.
It's a reflection of where the progressive movement inside the U.S. is at. That this is their response now to massive peace rallies inside Europe.
Fierce fighting continues in Ukraine as the world acknowledged the one-year anniversary of the start of the war Friday with protests.
Do you see that? Sorry, I have to stop it. Do you see this flag right here? I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, but it's a red and black flag. That's the flag of the Ukrainian Partisan Army that was a Nazi collaborator division responsible for numerous pogroms across Ukraine.
And vigils across the globe. Fierce fighting continues.
Okay, so
it's so quick. It's so quick. She doesn't even acknowledge the anti-war protests. All she says is there were protests acknowledging the one-year anniversary of the war, and they're showing a rally featuring the flag of Ukrainian fascists.
That was a pro-war rally. There's also a CIA-backed Free Syrian Army flag being flown.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, which is very
pro. That's another Democracy Now flag.
Yeah, absolutely. So, not even a mention on one of the top funded progressive shows in the U.S. Of wars of protests in Europe calling for peace, just as they gave 9 seconds to the Rage Against the War Machine rally on the end. So anyway, that's where we're at in the U.S. right now. That's the state of the establishment progressive left. And
yeah, so like I said earlier, I used the example of Al Jorgensen, where all you have to do is put a Democrat in control, and apparently wars are cool. Obama was not a bad president. It would be false of me to say that Obama was not a good president. I do think he was a good president on a lot of levels. But one of the things he was best for was the glossing over of the empire, and he made us feel good while we continued to do the things that George Bush and Dick Cheney were doing that were not good. And, there's tons of proof of that, which I'll have to go into in another bit. But look up the Trusted News Initiative and look up the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act. Both just evidence. The Trusted News Initiative is a lot more recent and didn't happen under Obama, but the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act is what enabled that. And it's kind of like Obama was great for what he did for the empire, that's for sure. And again, I don't hate the guy. I don't even hate the empire, but you just have to be an honest person, and you have to be able to look at that history through clear eyes. So another anti-war piece that I thought was great was Jimmy Dore had on this guy Jose Vega, who's one of the few people in the U.S. who's actually putting pressure on politicians. And I don't care what party you belong to or what issue you support, a nuclear war is going to kill us all. So we should start getting a little serious about this and putting serious pressure on politicians. And that's what this guy is doing. And he's a very brave person. And I salute him for this because, you know, it's not something that the average person can do. You could lose your job, all kinds of things. And I think he talks about that here. But let's listen to his protest because... good on Jimmy Dore for highlighting these kind of people too. Very few progressive outlets are doing that. They're busy attacking Matt Taibbi.
Over them lying about Ukraine, the Nord Stream pipeline.
UN Security Council had a meeting yesterday, and Ray McGovern spoke to it. He is a former member of the CIA, and he testified in support of Seymour Hersh's article on the United States bombing Nord Stream pipeline. If it is proven that the United States bombed the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, as has been asserted by Seymour Hersh and his article, will you call for the United States to acknowledge and admit that that was an act of war against Germany and Russia? And I'm asking this because this may be the only way to prevent the rest of us from being killed in a thermonuclear war. And I don't want to be fried. Don't you think the media should be reporting on whether or not this is true? And don't you think you should be inquiring into whether or not this is true?
Well, thank you for the question. One, I've got no information to suggest that the United States was involved in bombing the Nord Stream pipeline.
Because you weren't briefed on it.
Sir, you got your chance to ask a question.
You weren't given information because he explicitly says you weren't briefed on it. Shouldn't you inquire?
So here's what I'll say about, I think, President Biden's leadership generally as it relates to the Ukraine and Russia.
We committed an act of war. What are you doing to respond to that? We have to hold Biden accountable. Listen, you're from Brooklyn, right? You know when to call bullshit when you see it? So do I. This is bullshit right now. And I see what's happening right now. That does not silence me. You can hear me right now. I want you to say something about the bombing because we're all going to die from a nuclear war right now unless you stop it and you at least put and inquire into whether or not it's true. This war in Ukraine is going to leave us all dead. So what are you going to do? Because you need to inquire. I'm a New Yorker too.
Here's what I'll say.
Say it.
We're going to continue to stand with the Ukrainian people.
That's fucking bullshit. Do not do that. You will end us all dead.
It is war against...
We need peace. We need talks. Why are you sabotaging talks? Do not put your hands on me. We need peace talks. I am not going to take this. We need peace talks. You are leaving. Listen. Did you even read the allegations? No. How about accountability? Not airheadedness. Okay. How about bridges, not bombs? Okay. How about conversations, not cremation? Diplomacy, not destruction. How about that? How about it? You goddamn airhead, you're going to kill us all. I don't want to die in a goddamn nuclear war, and nobody does.
So that was well done, and what's amazing to me is the other people that sit around. So what was your? Let me just throw it to you. Are you kind of amazed at the other people's lack of urgency over this?
Of course I am. I think I will say there was one kid, a blonde kid, maybe he was like 18, 19 years old, who was cheering me on. He was like my number one supporter there. He was like, yeah, keep going. And that guy kept motivating me. And when I was escorted out, so was he. He was also escorted out too. And he was just there. He wasn't even like with me or anything. He wasn't with my folks. He just was just happy that somebody brought this up. And so, look, Jimmy, I think you do a good job in informing your audience. That little thumbnail sketch you gave in the very beginning. Hey, if you're not sure how we got into this war, let me give you a 60-second wrap-up. And I did just want to add one quick thing to that, which is, back in 2022, June, the U.S. Government Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe, also known as the Helsinki Commission, they had a live stream seminar talking about decolonizing Russia, a moral and strategic imperative. And this straight up called for a piece-by-piece dismemberment of Russia, breaking away as many 10 regions in effect, leaving only a tiny hub in Western Russia. This is up on YouTube, right? These are U.S. officials talking about how we're going to break up and dismantle Russia once we finish what we're doing in Ukraine. And so, I think that this is exactly what we need to keep doing, is informing people and informing the population of what's going on. And I also don't hold it against them because, hey, our neighbors are brainwashed. I don't hate my neighbor. I love my neighbor.
So you should watch this whole piece, and I'll obviously put a link to it in the description because it's great. First and foremost, wow, I get chills watching that. More of that. We need more of that. We need people with the balls to do that. That's what this country's about. You know, that level of protest. I mean, it's so cheers to Mr. Jose Vega for doing that. And to top it off, he's not just stopping there. He's looking to help other people organize these kind of protests, and he's not trying to make money off of it. Although I don't know, how do you survive, you know, as a protester of this kind of thing? It's tough, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, you don't do this because of anything other than the reality that you love your country and you don't want to see it go down the wrong path. And I mean, throughout history, these types of protests have been interwoven into the fabric of who we are. You know, Vietnam being the greatest example, in Iraq, of course, as well. And when you look back on the history of these wars, name one of them that ended up being for the betterment of society or the betterment of life in general on the planet. None of them have ever ended up. Look at Afghanistan. I mean, it ended up just being a gigantic hole to dump money into, which is exactly what Ukraine is going to be if you're looking at things honestly. It already is, as things crumble around us. So I thought we'd turn to an old friend and see what he has to say about the situation here. Keith Olbermann, what do you have to say?
Breaking news in a special edition of the Countdown podcast. Joe Biden's campaign installs a mentally impaired fascist and then nearly destroys the world. All that in the story of how NBC colluded to squelch criticism of Biden in Ukraine. This does not just violate journalistic and electoral ethics, it may be criminal, and it certainly should mean the metaphorical death penalty for a dark, evil propaganda channel masquerading as a news organization. All that and more in a special edition of Countdown's podcast, now available wherever you podcast.
So that's who we're tentatively referring to as based Keith Olbermann. We may call him, you know, I thought like Dark Keith doesn't sound right. Dark Olbermann, Dolberman maybe. That's a good one. Dolberman. I just came up with that on the fly. Keith Dolberman. You know, maybe that's what we call him. Dolberman Kincher or something. I don't know. Thanks for that commentary though, Keith. You're a brave American. And to be clear, that's satire. I cut his voice up and rearranged it, so the next thing I would like to talk about is I tuned into the Tim Pool podcast, you know, when I want to see another guy in a beanie talk about politics. And I don't wear this, by the way, because of Tim Pool. I used to wear my baseball cap, but this is just more comfortable. So I feel Tim on this level. He and I can maybe share a moment here. I love the beanie. It's very comfortable. And to be clear, you know, the reason that I wear the beanie on camera is because if I don't, my bald head shines and the light reflects off of it, and the glimmer that you get from my bald head just obscures anything else I would be able to say. So that's why I do the broadcast in a hat, because I look ridiculous without it. Not that I look ridiculous in normal life, that I look fine, but when I've got these bright lights shining off my white bald head, it becomes a distraction, and it's just not. You know, I'm trying to do aesthetically pleasing things here for you guys. I want you to be able to see things as beautifully as I do, right? So anyway, moving on here, I like to watch Tim Pool, and I like to watch Tim Pool because he has a lot of interesting guests who I would not probably otherwise pay attention to. Matt Gaetz being the number one. I love Matt Gaetz now, thanks to Tim Pool's podcast, and I don't necessarily agree with everything the guy says, and Tim Pool definitely has some takes that make me go, okay, whatever, dude. His recent Antifa hysteria, you know, and it's it's probably not recent either. He's always been hysterical about it. Antifa, because people who dressed as Antifa attacked him in, Portland or whatever. So I get it, Tim. You're pissed about Antifa. But the reason I'm bringing up Tim Pool is I wanted you to see what Steve Bannon said on his podcast, because it really stuck out to me, so much so that I tweeted it out and got a lot of shit for it. But listen to this.
With ads dropping the way they are this time of year, it feels like it's going to be a summer of very, very dark financial days. Now we're seeing this. Look, I don't want to say something that could precipitate it by encouraging people to panic or anything like that. I'm just saying, I agree with you that the world is, the neocon system is breaking apart. That means the night is always darkest before the dawn. I tell people to get some chickens and get some emergency food and learn how to take care of themselves.
I tell people, first thing is when a guy, look, this is madness. The economic system we have today is madness. When Biden sits there, as when you look at the depression of working class people in this country, and they come up this week, everything we've been talking about, and they come up with a $6.8 trillion budget. Not one cut to one program. In fact, the rate of increase, I think, is almost 6%. A 5.2% pay increase for federal employees. And across the board, they have at their own calculation what $1.5 trillion deficits as far as the aggregate go. The $3 trillion taxes, which my recommendation is the House should meet tomorrow and Saturday. The Republicans, they should pass every tax increase they've got, all of them. Send it to the Schumer and the Democrats and dare them to pass it. You're going to see what phonies they are, because it's all their donors. All the big hedge fund guys are their donors. All the billionaires are their donors. Those billionaires hate MAGA. Right? Yeah. And by the way, Schumer had the guts to do it, which he wouldn't do it. Biden would veto it because it's all his sponsors.
It's all in on the wealth tax.
I'm not actually for I'm for repatriation. No, I'm for more than the wealth tax. When you have one
the wealth tax,
I'm more than that. Now I want the repatriation. Look, when you have 1% of the people, citizens, own more assets than the bottom 90, that system can't sustain itself.
Agreed.
If the revolutionary generation came back, they would spit on the floor. They fought a revolution to get away from a landed aristocracy and the mercantilist system of the monopolies of the British East India Company and others like it. That's why John Adams and Sam Adams and Hancock were smugglers. The rest were smart lawyers. They said, we want our own deal. We're not going to do that. If they came back and said, you guys allowed this to devolve into an oligarchy? Are you kidding me? We're 1% of the people? This is exactly what they fought the revolution for.
I feel like Bravo, Steve Bannon. He sounds like Bernie Sanders there to some degree. And, he opened with some stuff about cutting programs. Yeah, the programs that need to be cut are the military. You don't need to be cutting food stamps. You don't need to be cutting things that actually help people. Daycare for kids, food, school lunches. What, as Bannon said right here, it's tilted way too far in the wrong direction, and it needs to be tilted back. And I applaud him for saying that, because he's right. And so let's listen. Matt Gaetz interjects something.
But there was a belief in the elites, even among the revolutionaries. Yes. There was a sense of duty that was expected of the elites. And
so what he's saying is, to some degree, Steve, but also the elites were the ones who set the government up, which is true. And what Gaetz is saying, though, even those elites at that time had a love enough for their country that they wouldn't have let it get to the point that it's at now, where it's completely going to be ruined. It's ruinous.
And that's what we lack today. And I don't know how you reignite that sense of patriotism.
I feel like I think the way you do it is what you guys did in the first week of January.
Except
but even that, when you had everybody in conservative media against you, when you had Fox News against you, we had it's unity and you guys are terrible guys. And I got to tell you, we came that close on that Friday night at 10 o'clock to total victory. Right? It was hung in the balance. So. I think people get patriotic when they see that, when they see action. They love their country. Go out in the hinterland. In your constituents, they're so far ahead of where we are. And it's not stupid. They understand the details. They understand what's going on, because of shows like Tim Pool and so many other podcasts out there that get the information out to people, and they're hungry for information. They will immerse themselves. If you put up different links to go to, they will start. I give homework assignments over the weekend.
Yo, I've seen that. People, I mean, I just started putting videos up, and shout out Jimmy Dore and Aaron Mate and that team for propping up my tweets and shouting out my tweets and everything about Rachel Maddow, because they definitely gave me a boost that I wouldn't have had, and I owe Jimmy a lot for calling me out, giving me that kind of like, I got the Jimmy Dore bump, so to speak.
People will read it and come back and will be informed and be asking questions in the chat rooms, etc. So people want the patriotism, the DNA of our revolution is still with us. Right? It's still with us. And remember, there's only a third of the guys in the revolution on our side, right? There's a third Tories, a third of ourselves, and a third in the middle, like there always is, to say, hey, I'm going to see how this thing plays out.
That's the resilience of the country.
The resilience, exactly.
So, there were some recent congressional hearings on the Twitter files, and I already covered these a little bit, but there's a couple of additional points that I didn't really dive into that I'd like to revisit here. So the first is this woman Plaskett, who is, a lot of these people I've never seen until these hearings. So she's from the Virgin Islands, I guess, but she doesn't have a vote actually in Congress. She's a so-called delegate. And a lot of people pointed out, obviously online, the irony of her calling Taibbi a so-called journalist with that title. But I think also the main reason they picked this woman is because she's a woman of color, so that any of the pushback against her they can call racism or misogyny or whatever, the typical Democratic identity politics playbook. Anyway, let's listen to what she has to say.
3 weeks ago, House Oversight had this hearing with actual Twitter executives who had actual firsthand knowledge about what happened in 2020. And that didn't go so well for the House Republicans, because real evidence showed that there wasn't coordination between Twitter and the federal government, as they like the American people to believe, and that all the so-called Twitter files really showed was a discussion on content moderation, and that we only got a fraction of the discussion. So now we're back again, no surprise. What else have they got to talk about? Not what's interested in the American people are interested, not what taxpayer dollars have brought us here to Washington to do. And the Republicans have brought in 2 of Elon Musk's public scribes to release cherry-picked, out-of-context emails and screenshots designed to promote his chosen narrative, Elon Musk's chosen narrative, that is now being parroted by the Republicans, because the Republicans think that these witnesses will tell a story that's going to help them out politically.
Okay, right off the bat, how come that argument isn't made about Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post? Because he's far more rich than Elon Musk is. Don't quote me on that, but I'm sure that he's richer than Elon Musk is. Amazon has its grubby paws in everything at this point, but that's already a weird argument to make. That I saw a lot of people making that argument. Oh, these guys are doing PR for the richest man in the world. Yeah, every mainstream corporate news outlet is PR for a rich person. The New York Times is run by the what's the group called? Let me look at this. Who owns the New York Times? Owned by the Sulzberger Group, A.G. Sulzberger. Major individual shareholder is the Sulzberger family. NBC Universal is owned by Comcast. So all of our major news networks are run by rich people. So the Elon Musk thing is a joke.
On Tuesday, the majority released an 18-page report claiming to show that the FTC is, quote, harassing Twitter. Oh my, poor Twitter. Including by seeking information about its interactions with individuals before us today. How did the report reach this conclusion? By showing two single paragraphs from a single demand letter, even though the report itself makes clear that there were numerous demand letters with numerous requests, none of which we've been able to see.
That's a weird argument to make, too. They use 2 examples. Of course, they're not going to show you every single one.
That are more demand letters and more requests of Twitter. In other words, the conclusions are based on a fraction of information out of context, cherry-picked, surprise, just like the Twitter files. The majority conveniently forgot to share with the public that in May of 2022, well before Musk acquired Twitter, the FTC had already fined the company $150 million for failing to safeguard users' data. Users, the American people, other individuals, its 150 million users, Twitter had not safeguarded them. Twitter entered into this consent agreement that required it to make regular...
So it's obvious that these people all had things pre-written for them by someone, probably PR people or whatever, but they don't know what they're actually talking about.
Reports to the FTC, and the previous consent decree between Twitter and the FTC was entered into in 2011. Elon Musk might not like this requirement, but Twitter had issues with FTC long before Musk bought the company, and there's nothing political about that.
Okay, again, he's releasing stuff that existed before he bought the company. That's the point, kind of.
We've asked for the full set of documents that Musk must have shared with the Republicans on the committee, but we can draw some logical conclusions from what we have been given. You know what the Republican report actually shows? Two conclusions. First,
Taibbi is a bad person. Trump colluded with Russia. Trump colluded with Russia. Taibbi is a bad person. I wrote a book about it. Taibbi is bad. Jeff Girth.
Americans can see through this. Musk is helping you out politically, and you're going out of your way to promote and protect him and to praise him for his work. This isn't just a matter of what data was given to these so-called journalists before us now. There are many legitimate questions about where Musk got the financing to buy Twitter. We know for a fact that foreign countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and possibly even Russia and China are investors presently in Twitter.
So BlackRock and Vanguard, huge investors in all the major networks. I'm sure Saudi Arabia, I'm not going to dig it up right now, but I'm sure Saudi Arabia and Qatar have holdings in all other major media companies as well.
Do these countries now have access to private Twitter user data? What agreements has Elon Musk reached with them? We know how Elon Musk funded the purchase.
Well, it's funny because on the other side of this, they'll argue that it's a private company. Remember all the people arguing, like, oh, it's a private company. Now it's not a private. The private company argument is not coming out.
Because it's public. Let's look at a slide here. Here's what it shows. Musk got $500 million in financing from Beyonce. That's in highlight for you. A crypto exchange platform run by Chinese billionaire. That billionaire has described his funding as a small contribution to the cause. I don't know what that cause is. Musk got $1 billion from Larry Ellison, whose super PAC spent millions on Republican candidates last cycle, including election deniers. Musk got $375 million, highlighted here, from Qatar, which has recently been questioned about its lobbying practices. Musk got $700 million from Vi Capital, a secretive investment fund based in Dubai. And, very interesting, as you can see down below, the nephew of the Saudi king is Twitter's second largest investor at a much larger amount.
So that's not the point. They're using all this stuff to deflect from the reality of what the Twitter files exposes, which is that the state was working in concert with media to shape a narrative. And I've gone over this before, but the reason that there's such a gigantic outrage at Elon Musk and Twitter and all this is because Twitter showed that you can get around the kingmakers in the legacy media through social media. And that's why Trump was such an aberration. They did not expect him to be able to bypass that wave of propaganda that they put out. He's a racist, he's a white supremacist. Black people and Hispanic people still voted for Trump despite all that. And he was able to get around that narrative through Twitter. So now that it's been exposed that the state used Twitter to censor things like the Hunter Biden laptop and all these other things, it's clear that this is new to social media, but not new to media in general, because what's happening is the veil is falling and these people are scrambling to pull it back up. Anyway, this Plaskett lady was obviously propped up to say these things because she's a woman of color, and, you know, obviously to push back against her is to be a racist or a misogynist. Let's move to Debbie Wasserman Schultz next, okay? Because the general take from some people was that she really handed it to Matt Taibbi. So let's listen.
If it's likely to be slanted, incomplete, or designed to reach a foregone, easily disputed, or invalid conclusion. Would you agree with that?
I think it depends.
Really? You wouldn't agree that a journalist should avoid spoon-fed, cherry-picked information if it's likely to be slanted, incomplete, or designed to reach a foregone, easily disputed, or invalid conclusion?
Congresswoman, I've done probably a dozen stories involving whistleblowers. Every reported story that I've ever done across 3 decades involves sources who have motives. Every time you do a story, you're making a balancing test between the public interest.
Reclaiming my time. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I ask you this because before you became Elon Musk's hand-picked journalist, and pardon the oxymoron, you stated this on Joe Rogan's podcast about being spoon-fed information, and I quote, "I think that's true of any kind of journalism," and you'll see it behind me here. "I think that's true of any kind of journalism. Once you start getting handed things, then you've lost. They have you at that point, and you got to get out of that habit. You just can't cross that line. Do you still believe what you told Mr. Rogan? Yes or no? Yes or no?"
Yes.
Good. Now, you crossed that line with the Twitter files.
No.
Elon Musk, it's my time. Please do not interrupt me. Elon Musk spoon-fed
These people are like preschool teachers. They're So most people, if you know anything, you already know this, but that clip was the context that quote that she pulled out of was him talking about the CIA feeding stories to Seymour Hersh, and him going like, "I don't know, it's kind of fishy you guys are feeding me these stories." So she conveniently left that part of it out, but let's keep watching.
Elon Musk spoon-fed you his cherry-picked information, which you must have suspected promotes a slanted viewpoint, or at the very least generates another right-wing conspiracy theory. You violated your own standard, and you appear to have benefited from it. Before the release of the emails in August of last year, you had 661,000 Twitter followers. After the Twitter files, your followers doubled, and now it's 3 times what it was last August. I imagine your Substack readership, which is a subscription, increased significantly because of the work that you did for Elon Musk. Now, I'm not asking you to put a dollar figure on it, but it's quite obvious that you've profited from the Twitter files. You hit the jackpot on that Vegas slot machine to which you referred. That's true, isn't it?
I've also reinvested.
You've made some. No. Is it true that you have profited since you were the recipient of the Twitter files? You've made money. Yes or no?
I think it's probably a wash, honestly.
No, you have made.
So her argument is, hey, you made money doing this work, and that somehow invalidates it. So good old reliable Emma from the Young Turks happened to pipe in, and she had to say, getting owned by Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and she posted this clip as kind of evidence that Matt Taibbi got owned by Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And so I responded, "Do you make money at your job, Emma?" Ha ha ha, owned. As if that somehow owns people, that they make money doing their work for a living. So you can see how these people are just ridiculous cult members. They support their cult. They don't care about what the truth is. They don't care about the implications that this has on just people in general, or when the balance of power switches back to Republicans, that it will be used against them. They're very obviously hacks. They're very obviously paid to be like this. I don't see Emma going like, well, there's validity to this part of what she said, and breaking it down. She's just cheering for her team like a good little cheerleader, like a good little hack. So good on you, Emma. Hope you don't make money at your job. So the other person who commented heavily in this, I wanted to highlight again because I kind of talked about him a little bit before, was this Goldman guy. And here, let's watch this guy talk a little bit, because this guy is just I didn't know, I had no idea who he was before this. So I don't want to watch this whole thing again, but let's just watch just a little.
Of course. Okay. So are you aware that the Washington Post analysis of the hard drive showed that it had been altered?
I have heard that, but I'm also saying CBS verified.
Politico.
And other media organizations have verified. I mean,
we're not talking about
really
we're not
this
talking
argument
about
anymore.
authenticity. We're not talking about authenticity. We're talking about whether it's been altered.
Yeah.
Okay? There's no question there's some material on the hard drive that is authentic and accurate. But are you aware that there's some material that is not?
My understanding is that there are copies of the hard drive that have been tampered with, and that media organizations, including CBS, have verified that the laptop in question was not tampered with.
I don't know what the laptop in question, but let's move on, because you said in your Twitter files, am I correct, that every single fact in the New York Post story was accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall that the first paragraph of that Post story said that then Vice President Joe Biden pressured Ukraine to fire its prosecutor general because he was investigating Burisma, where Hunter Biden was on the board?
Yes.
Okay. I have here, which I'd like to enter into the record, the Trump-Ukraine Impeachment Inquiry Report, 300 pages by the House Intelligence Committee. Did you review this report before you said that every fact in this story was accurate?
Without objection, the material be entered in the record.
Did I read that before I wrote the Twitter files? No.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm aware
because
of its
if
content.
you read this, you would have known that every single State Department and Trump administration expert on Ukraine said that Vice President Joe Biden, in concert with the European Union and the IMF, was executing official U.S. policy by encouraging Ukraine to fire the prosecutor general because he was not prosecuting corruption and was not prosecuting companies like Burisma. So that story, notwithstanding your allegations, was false, and I yield back.
So I already went over this guy's highlight reel of fake outrage, but this guy apparently, according to Glenn Greenwald and Greg Price, this guy is a... Glenn Greenwald says, Dan Goldman, just elected to Congress from Manhattan, is the perfect symbol of the Dem Party. The heir to the billionaire Levi Strauss fortune, unearned net worth of $250 million, went to DC's Sidwell friends, Yale and Stanford, worked for the Mueller investigation, now does this. So anyway, this guy is another party hack he's basically falling back on a completely false premise of the Trump Russia gate stuff, and just let's listen to the clip that Glenn Greenwald.
About Twitter. And even with Twitter, you cannot find actual evidence of any direct government censorship of any lawful speech. And when I say lawful, I mean non-criminal speech, because plenty of speech is non-criminal.
I'll give you one. Gentleman's time to expire. I'd ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the following email from Clark Humphrey, Executive Office of the Presidency, White House Office, January 23rd, 2021. That's the Biden administration, 4:39 a.m. Hey, folks. This goes to Twitter. Hey, folks, wanted to use the term they use the term Mr. Goldman just used. Wanted to flag the below tweet, and I'm wondering if we can get moving on the process for having it removed ASAP.
Boom.
That is...
Could you read the below tweet?
And then if we can keep an eye out for tweets that fall in this same genre, that would be great. This is a tweet on the very issue that Thomas.
Can you just, for the fullness of the record, can you read the? Because I've not seen this. Can you read the tweet that it's referencing?
I don't have the tweet here with me, but the gentleman.
So there's the full tweet, and yeah, this guy's not a hack or anything. He's not out here as a cult member going, "You have no proof of this." Oh, well, here's proof right here. Oh, Mr. Goldman. Anyway, these people, they're very sad people. They're very sad people. But you know who's not sad? Louis C.K. Louis C.K. and Tim Dillon. I wanted to share this piece for a couple reasons. First of all, the perspective that they give here on being a gang member or what it's like to be in a gang is probably more illuminating than anything you've ever heard from two white guys. I shouldn't say that. I haven't watched all the documentaries. I'm sure there's great documentaries with black men, but two white guys explaining to another white guy how people get into gangs, especially someone who hasn't ever been around gangs or grown up in it, like older people that don't understand this. This is great. But then I think what I really like is what they get to near the end of this. And let's talk about that after I show you the clip. So here it is.
What are we offering the kids that isn't the gang? That's my question.
Well, because here's what happens.
Right.
Kids that end up in gangs, okay? So, like, your mother... And I'm not describing every gang person. I'm describing somebody I'm making up.
Right.
Your mother is... You don't even know... You haven't seen her.
Right.
Sometimes you see her on the street.
Right.
She's taking a guy into a building foyer to suck his cock.
That's right.
So that she can get some crack cocaine.
Right.
Sometimes you see her go, I think that's my mom.
That's mom's. And you're with your friends and you're embarrassed.
Right.
And they tease you.
They go, your mom sucks a guy's cock for crack.
She sucked him off for crack.
What the way they teased us.
Yeah.
Like, you look funny, or,
Right.
you listen to Bay City Rollers, but they're like, your mom is sucking a guy's cock right there.
For crack.
Behind the McDonald's, I can see it.
And then you'll always
How
have
did that feel, fucking loser?
You'll always have that one good friend who's like, don't worry about them.
Don't worry about it. Yeah.
There's one good
their mom's
friend.
it's not like their mom's. Nobody's that standing there to make fun of that kid has a great life.
Exactly.
So probably they don't much tease each other,
right?
Because the the meanest kid sees that guy's mom sucking a cock, and he goes, "I'm gonna let that go,"
right?
Because I know how that's gonna come back.
That's mom.
Yeah, because that's my aunt.
That's right. That's aunt.
Yeah. So that's that person's mom. Let's start there, okay? Yeah. And he lives with his grandma,
right?
Who is just tired at sucking dick. So at least there's that.
She's elderly.
Yeah. And she goes to church, and that's the church, or whatever. And by the way, this is like 90s. I don't know anything about people's lives anymore. I don't know anything about anyone's life.
Similar.
And then his dad killed his uncle, and it was a double murder, it's whatever. And people are in prison, and and he goes to a school, where it's just a cop frisks you at the door.
Yeah, it's just kids throwing chairs.
Yeah, it's just madness.
There's no education.
Yes. Yeah. And every day he walks by these gangs, and because he's not affiliated, go, what the fuck? I'm going to kick your ass every time you walk through this neighborhood.
That's right.
And all his friends are like, if you just join Red, you walk down Red streets, and you're okay.
Yeah.
You will be safe if you do that. And we have parties, we have barbecues.
Right.
We go out. We
have fun.
There's every girl you want is affiliated or in the gang.
Right.
And so then you join a gang, and you start acting tough, and you start talking about, and then you start carrying a weapon, and then the city says, we got to get rid of these gangs. like if we get rid of the gangs, the kid will be fine.
Right.
Like, where does he walk back? Like, okay, gang, everybody go home to what?
Right. Home to what? Yeah. So that was my whole thing. It's like, listen, we all know that gangs have a lot of negatives. And the problem is there's nothing being offered to these kids outside of that. Like, we have not articulated a vision for a lot of these young kids that doesn't involve joining a gang.
Right.
That's the issue.
So that is really good right there. And I think a lot of people need to hear that, because that's the genesis of what they're joking in some level, but they're accurately describing what a gang looks like, probably better than most people have ever heard it described. All right, let's be honest. So there's one other little bit in here I wanted to highlight where they talk about why this all exists, and it's really good. So let's play that clip too.
It's old media. What you have to adapt to now is that you're creating reality every time you utter something.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
So 40%.
Yes. It's great.
There's a quotient of human suffering that's just always there. So you can squeeze the balloon here and it pops up here, and it's just I mean, the thing is, as long as you have a world where people want more than they can hold in their hands,
that's a problem.
There, you're going to have this problem.
That's right.
I mean, it's so basic. It goes to the most basic thing that if you don't get rid of it,
right,
you're not going to solve anything. And,
right.
And should you, what the words solve and goal and failure, are all relative,
right,
to what you value and what you don't.
Right.
So if you like a world where some people can be not only rich but just like have 4 things,
right,
that you don't know where they are,
right.
If you own things that you're not holding, like this, you're part of the problem,
right.
If you view those as problems,
right.
The reason there are gangs and murder is because I have some stuff that's behind a locked door, and I depend on a whole system to keep people from just going in there. But if you didn't need those, if you didn't need to have, and I don't mean the wealthy obviously is an acute example of it.
Yeah.
I don't know where human beings got this urge to have more than just a little thing of food, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A roof, a food, a tool to make food with,
But that's the stem. That's where all the problems stem
all of them. Because if you just need what you really just need, sustenance and a little pleasure from the sky and and nature, then you need someone to look after shit for you. You need to convince someone else that it's a good idea for them to protect your stuff, the stuff that you're not, while you're sleeping, or stuff that you can't look at. Do you know what I mean?
And that creates
a system of like people willing to harm each other for somebody else's money.
Right. Yeah.
And that's it right there. And that's the note that I wanted to end on. But I just thought that was such a profound kind of breakdown of our society and where it's at. And when you talk to people who are like, oh, capitalism is the devil, or, this is the devil. No, human nature is the devil. At the end of the day, human nature creeps into every single system of power, whether it's capitalism, whether it's, monarchy, aristocracy, socialism, communism. There's always a hierarchy of leadership, and the people will fight for that power to be at the top, to be the one who controls that. And I like the way that he breaks it down. They start with the conversation about the gangs and why things are so messed up the way that they are, and it's because people like to own stuff. Frank Zappa has a quote, and I got made fun of by some uber communists on Twitter the other day for referencing it, but he said, communism doesn't work because people like to own stuff. And that's kind of what Louis is saying here. Louis not criticizing communism at all. He's basically saying the reason we have theft and these problems and these gangs and all this kind of stuff traces to, we have created this system where we want to have stuff that we can't always have with us, and we want to own things that someone else needs to protect that need to be behind a locked door. And he's right. And so it's one of those philosophical things that it's not necessarily a political issue that I would normally cover, but it's related and tied into all these themes. So it's definitely something I thought I would highlight. Anyway, take care of yourselves. Thanks for listening.